We've just been studying Bell's inequality, which showed very strikingly and clearly how it was impossible to preserve the idea that all the properties of an entangled system of two particles are contained in each side of that separation separately. We can't act as if it's just a matter of discovery of some previously existing condition that allows us to determine whether, say, a photon has angular momentum in one direction or another, or an electron is spinning this way or that way. So if we can't do that, it means that there's something about this system of separated particles that is fundamentally entangled. It's almost as if it's one system that simply resists Einstein's hope to be able to describe the world in terms of localized phenomena, as if we could make a tiny bubble around each part of the physical universe and act as if it could be described in its entirety without reference to things outside. So who was Bell? John Stuart Bell was an Irish physicist, born in 1928 and died in 1990. He was somebody who used quantum mechanics all the time. He did fundamental work in particle physics as a theorist. He had experience at accelerators, but he really was interested in this Einstein-Bohr debate. And all of his initial inclinations were that Einstein really had the best of the argument over Bohr. He hoped to be able to show that in some ways Einstein was right, that there were some hidden variables, as Einstein possibly might have hoped, that would capture what was going on, even if position and momentum, for instance, weren't the right way of describing things, that somehow there was a complete description of nature, a local description of nature that was going to be possible. But bit by bit, Bell began to dismantle Einstein's view, in fact, Bell's own earlier views, and he ended up creating this inequality, understanding this equality, in a way that was really extremely important in demolishing the view that many people had, carrying over from Einstein, that there was an entire local description of a particle, even one that was seemingly entangled with another. Bell ended up creating a new quantum technological philosophy, if you can bear that complex of words. It spoke to the very nature of physical reality, in which one had to take seriously entanglement as fundamental. One couldn't aspire to some not yet discovered hidden variable theory that would sometime be displayed, that would give us a complete description that was local. Instead, Bell contributed to a philosophical revision that was based on the physics, but one that eventually gave rise to a new technology that's been put into action by people like John Clauser, Alain Aspect, and Anton Zeilinger. It's come to be not only a hope for a new technology, but actually is something that's very much going on in laboratories today. So in this, our final quantum lecture, we'll proceed in 3 steps. First, I want to say a little bit more about what John Bell believed he had found. Second, I want to bring in a colleague and friend, David Kaiser, and we'll have a discussion about the strange, interesting, counterculturally inflected work that in the 1970s brought fundamental philosophical questions back into the center of quantum mechanics and physics, and that led in the more recent past to the development of a new technology of quantum entanglement. And that will lead to the third part of this lecture, a discussion with Misha Lukin, a colleague here at Harvard, and his work that is one of this new movement to actually make laboratory sense out of the application of Bell's theorem into strange-sounding new worlds of quantum cryptography, quantum money, and quantum computation. So, to step 1. John Bell, as he thought about what he had done, came to believe that he'd really, through Bell's inequality, shown that nature was fundamentally not local. He put it this way: a final moral concerns terminology. Why did such serious people, he's talking about the founders of quantum mechanics and those who followed them, take so seriously axioms which now seem so arbitrary? I suspect that they were misled by the pernicious misuse of the word measurement in contemporary theory. This word very strongly suggests the ascertaining of some pre-existing property of some thing, any instrument involved playing a purely passive role. But, Bell continues, quantum experiments are just not like that, as we learned especially from Bohr. The results have to be regarded as the joint product of system and apparatus, the complete experimental setup. Now, this notion, what Bell's saying here, supporting Niels Bohr's idea that the apparatus and the system have to be considered together, was anathema to Einstein. It's exactly what Einstein did not want. And it was what John Bell started out not wanting either. But as a result of what he had found in Bell's inequality, Bell came to believe that the idea of locality itself was fundamentally flawed. He put, as a summary statement, his concerns about quantum mechanics into this lapidary phrase: I am a quantum engineer, but on Sundays I have principles. And by that, Bell meant that he was always going back and forth between the experimental, manipulative, engineering consequences of the entangled state in which one electron and another that had been bound up together were simply not to be considered as separate until you actually conduct a measurement. And on the other hand, Bell's philosophical concerns with the meaning of quantum mechanics, that you do have to come up with some principled way of understanding what had happened. And for Bell, that meant accepting that the world was not and would never be describable in local terms.